So, de facto segregation and de jure segregation. Now, I don't think people realize this, but I'll put it in this terms. Use your critical thinking skills when I'm talking, because the thing is that there's a lot of misinformation in history, but which is why you have to use critical thinking skills, because if you believe the same thing they repeat over and over and over again, you're just going to repeat the same thing over and over again and not think. That's what happens when, you tell a lie over and over and over again. People tend to believe it. Now, the Southerners were forced to separate by law. Do you realize that? They were forced to separate by law. It's right in your face. They were forced. The Northerners, on the other hand, it was a custom, right? It was a custom, because the North was the real racist, bigoted society, not the South. It's not the South didn't have problems. Yes, they did, but not compared to the North. They forced the Southerners to separate by law. Why wasn't there a law before? Why wasn't there a mechanism, or even de facto segregation? There was no de facto segregation in the South. And because there was no de facto segregation in the South, that's why they had to force a law on the Southerners, because they were mingling too much. And I keep on saying there was a lot of mulattoes in the South. Why was there a lot of mulattoes in the South? Because Caucasians and Negroes were actually getting along better in the South than they were in the North. But the Northerners are dictating the information, and they're telling us that no, the South was the racist, bigoted society. These are the same people that voted for Lincoln, because Lincoln was saying that he's not going to expand slavery into the Western Territories. He's not going to allow it. That means no black people, and they didn't want black people in the Western Territories. They wanted it all white and all free. The North was the racist, bigoted society. They won the war. They came down. They started kicking black people out of positions of power, because black people, a whole bunch of black people, were in positions of power in the South, because Caucasians and Negroes were actually getting along with one another. It wasn't a problem. But the Northerners did not like this. The Northerners came down, they started kicking black people out, and then forced the Southerners to separate. Forced them by law. And you actually should tell this to your teacher. Your teacher and other people, and make them realize that, yeah, the Southerners were forced by law to separate. What's up with that? If they had de facto segregation in the South, there's no way that a whole bunch of black people would get in positions of power in the South. Because they didn't have that in the North. And what's funny is that the North, supposedly that's the birthplace of the Republican Party, and they would tell you that the Republican Party is for the Negro, and the Democratic Party is for the white man. So how come a whole bunch of black people didn't get into positions of power in the North? That's weird. But they got into positions of power in the South. And the Northerners are telling us that, that the South is horrible and everything like that. They were destroying their property. Like slave owners were deliberately destroying and damaging their property. That makes no sense whatsoever. I know some of them did, but the vast majority did that. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then black people were so feeble-minded and docile that we were being brutalized for decades. Let's not talk about centuries. Decades upon decades, and we didn't do anything about it? That doesn't make any sense. Black people are fighters. Right? So we wouldn't tolerate that. We would have burned down the entire South. But they're convincing us that black people are so feeble-minded that we would allow ourselves to be brutalized like that. And the slave owners were such idiots that they were constantly damaging and destroying their property, which is counterproductive to a good business. And that it was a racist society. They were so racist that they forced the Southerners to separate by law. If you critically think and don't believe the BS that they say over and over again, you start to realize that, hey, they're lying about a lot of stuff here. What's going on? It doesn't make sense. And you really have to critically think about history and the stuff that they say, because there's a lot of propaganda surrounding the South, surrounding black history and culture. In a sense, world history, there's a lot of propaganda. And it's very annoying.